Welcome to Slate Church. We are so glad that you're tuning in today and pray that wherever you are, this message will bless you. If this impacts you in any way, we would love to hear about it. Send an email to mystory@slatechurch.com.
All right. Cool. Can we thank the band? Can we thank Muscle Team for setting up all this, everything you see? Can we thank Host Team for smiling and greeting you on the way in? Can we give each other a high five as we take a seat? That's awesome. There's like 3 high fives given as people. You can hear each high five. You're like, what, that person, listen, that person, and somebody at the back. Good to see you. As Pastor Luke introduced me, my name is Brandon, and I'm one half of the other half of the lead pastors. I'm 1/4 of the makeup of the lead pastors here at Slate Church. Whoa! It's like the first time I actually almost fell off the stage. I'm really excited for the fall. There's something in the air. There's students coming back from school, which is super exciting. Who's back from being away from the summer? We got a couple of students over here. Good to see you guys. So good to have you back. And sorry to point you out, but it's good to have you back. And I love these kind of days because on the street right now, all of a sudden we have cars piling up, and it means that students are coming back to the city. And of course, we're not just a student church, but we thrive off of the youth of our church, right? We're an intergenerational church that's young at heart. I'm going to laugh my head off for something over here is funny. Did I forget to do on my zipper? Okay, we're good. Okay, good. But just absolutely love it. We're intergenerational, but we will always remain young at heart, and it's because we want to have a church that's here 20 years from now that our kids still want to come to, right? So even though I might not want to sing some of the songs, or used to not want to sing some of the songs that we even sing now, we're going to keep singing them because that's what the youth are singing. The youth. Everybody say the youth. And we're going to remain young at heart no matter what the cost looks like, okay? I'm excited to speak out of something that I've learned a little bit of on the back half of the summer. So we're coming into the fall, and how do we know that it's fall time? Pumpkin spice lattes. They're at Starbucks, and I think it's a bit of a crime. It's we still have 20 days left of summer or something like that, and there are already pumpkin spice lattes at Starbucks. I say we go and protest Starbucks. Who's with me? Although I have to admit that yesterday I may have had a pumpkin spice latte, and I was like, all right, I'm ready for fall. I am the most basic white dude that you've ever met, because I'm like, I'll get a pumpkin spice latte, half sweet, half cream, or whatever. I don't even know how to order those kind of drinks. Usually I just go in and get a dark roast. But fall is here. Who cares about what meteorologists and whoever else decides the seasons? Forget what they say. Starbucks has said fall is here. And so on the back half of summer, I'm going to just talk as if summer's over. I learned some stuff from, I believe God showed me some stuff just about the way that I was living my life up until that point. And I want to share it with you. Is that okay? Is it okay to share out of some of the things that I've been learning as one of your lead pastors and what God's been showing me on the back half of summer, okay? So why don't we turn to Matthew, because Pastor Brandon doesn't speak out of any book of the Bible other than Matthew. And I'm not the worst for this. There's a pastor in Vancouver, and he spoke out of the book of Matthew for 3.5 years. Only Matthew. And it was fascinating, actually. And I'm just going to speak out of Matthew one more time here. And then I will probably speak out of it next week as well. But the book of Matthew is the first book of the New Testament, the part of the Bible that looks back on the life of Jesus. And Matthew was a tax collector before he became a follower of Jesus. This is important because a lot of us in this room, we might wonder, like, would Jesus want to accept me as I am? I hope so. I mean, the people that started following Jesus early in the church's history were people that nobody would have expected would have followed Jesus. In fact, they're not just people that nobody would have expected would have followed Jesus. They're actually people that they would have never expected that God would pick. And that's even more important because those of us, sometimes we just find ourselves following Jesus. We're like, is he going to allow this much longer? Like, look at me. I'm a wreck, as Nathan Finoki would say. I'm a dumpster fire, right? I'm a dumpster fire of a Christian, and yet somehow God is allowing me to follow him. But you need to know today that it's not just that you're following Jesus by mistake. God actually chose you to follow him. He's actually called you to follow him. And that revelation is actually much deeper than, oh my gosh, I kind of found myself following Jesus. We're going to find ourselves in Matthew chapter 11, verse, let's see here, 28. All right, if you have it, why don't you say, I'm there? How many of you said, I'm there, that were actually completely lying? Thank you, Julia. That's me every week. Pastor Luke or Pastor Emma is like, hey, if you're there, say I'm there. And I'm like, I'm there. I don't even have anything that resembles a Bible in my hand at all. Just supporting the speaker. All right. So Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, it says this, and Jesus is about to make a bit of a case for what it looks like to find rest, okay? In Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, Jesus is saying this. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your what? For your souls. I love that, because I don't just need rest for my body. That's not what I come to Jesus for, although I do need that at times. I don't just need rest from my mind when I come to God. I need rest in my soul. You know, if I could get rest in my soul, I think that I might actually be able to do anything that God calls me to. And so he says, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I love that. You know, it invokes for me the idea of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a biblical idea instituted by God, not by law, but actually by practice. You know, that God actually rested on the seventh day. He actually showed the way before he told us the way. Good leadership principle, right? Show people what to do before telling them what to do. Otherwise, they might be a little bit skeptical of what you're telling them to do. And it invokes the idea of the Sabbath, and I find it interesting because the Sabbath was the idea that one day a week, we work really hard 6 days a week, and then one day a week, we just take it off to absolutely enjoy ourselves in God. That's what it's about. And God's the one that set it up. And then all of a sudden, we read our passage, and it goes into this little passage right after this in chapter 12. It says that at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. You know, Jesus set up the Sabbath, and now some religious people want to tell Jesus how to use his own Sabbath. Amazing. And you know what Jesus is saying? Listen, let's not be Pharisaical about the Sabbath. Let's not be religious about the Sabbath, but let's understand why the Sabbath matters and how it can actually contribute to becoming our best in God in our lives. So that's what I want to speak about today. And if you're taking notes, just write down this title, Rest. ... Easy. Rest easy. Rest ... Easy. And I want to talk to you from the premise of when we receive God's rest, we actually become our best. It rhymes. It's going to stick with us all week. All right, let's pray. Jesus, thank you for the revelation that you gave me over this later half of the summer. I thank you for the peace that I've been experiencing as I live it out. God, I pray that your peace would just fall on all of us in this room. And Jesus, I just pray that as we go out from this place and we even see the row of cars that are passing by right now, that God, we'd be inspired for what this year could look like as a church. I pray this in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. Awesome. Well, you know, this season has changed now that we're in fall because Starbucks said so. It's quite a nostalgic season for me. I've for the last number of years, whether it's been church and church planting and that sort of thing, or it was being in university or getting married or whatever else, a lot of big things in my life have happened in fall. Does anybody, a lot of big things have happened in your life in fall? We got married August 26th. Thanks, Julia. And we got married August 26th, about 7 years ago. We celebrated our 7-year anniversary this past August 26th. And I remember the season and the leaves changing. And I remember the first thing that we did once we moved into our new place in Ancaster, Ontario, was we did a big hike up Dundas Peak. Now, some of you may have gone to Dundas Peak and are like, that's a hike to Dundas Peak. No, we climbed up the side of Dundas Peak. I don't know why we did it, but we're like, we're young, we're married, we got a lot of energy, let's do stuff. So we like scaled this thing. And I remember it was just like one of the most incredible times of our lives. If you've ever been married, if you are married, you look back to that season of your life when you're early married, like those first few weeks, you're just like discovering stuff for the first time. You're like, we checked into a hotel for the first time ever. I'm like, I feel like a man. No longer is my dad telling me like, wait out in the car and I'm wondering what the heck he's doing in there for an hour and a half. But now I get to go in the car and with my wife and just tell the car to stay in the parking lot and go check myself in with my wife. Like it was an amazing time of life. And a lot of people say that your first year is going to be your most difficult. We didn't experience that. Our first year wasn't our most difficult. It was like the best year of my life. But then the next year became better. The next year became better. I just remember that a lot was happening in that season of our life. In fact, Em and I, if you didn't already know this, we got married between second and third year of university. And it was like quite a test because we still had half of our undergrads left to do. Everybody was telling us, what the heck are you doing? Like, you don't have any money. And we're like, oh, you're supposed to have money to get married? Like, didn't know that. Should have told us before we got married, Like, that would have been helpful to know. And we're in school. We're living on our own for the first time, like just the two of us. And so we decided to make it easy on ourselves, and we each took on 4 jobs. Each of us took on 4 jobs. Okay, so in the mix of jobs that we had, I don't really know what Emma was doing because we didn't have enough time to talk about what we were doing. We just knew we had jobs and money was coming in. We're like, great, perfect. But I know what I was doing. I was a personal support worker for my friend. He was handicapped from the age of 7 years old. He had a stroke at the age of 7. And so I was his personal support worker. Best job in the world. Essentially, I got free trips on a motorized wheelchair across campus. It was the best job that you could have had. I refereed hockey. I don't know if I got paid to be a student chaplain. We were the emergency response team for the universities. We got called twice all year and got paid for a full year. It was phenomenal. And just talk about God's blessing, right? And I was the editor-in-chief of our university newspaper. Many of you didn't realize that. It's a little thing that I've tucked away to tell you now to get a little bit more street cred with some of you. You wouldn't tell from my Instagram stories or if I texted you because I'm always saying sorry for the grammar because apparently when you get out of university, grammar is useless. But I remember being the editor-in-chief, and as editor-in-chief, you had basically a month to get it at the newspapers. So I remember, working hard ahead of time, like 6 hours ahead of time when the newspaper needed to come out to get the newspaper out. I remember the panic in the office. I remember I was, believe this is a graphic creative team. Listen up. I was formatting all of the pages of the newspaper. Yeah, you should. Yeah, don't go look at them at the time. I look back, I was proud of them, and then just this past week, I took a look at them, and I'm like, dang, if anybody ever finds these, they're not going to allow me to be their pastor. Like, it was that bad, right? And I just remember, in the office those last 6 hours, and I would just be like, I'm so sorry. And we would order in donuts, and we would order in all this stuff to just, fuel people and keep them going. And we're, contacting professors at, 6 o'clock p.m. We're like, can you write an article? We need it done in the next half hour. And they're like, what is wrong with you guys? And so I had myself, writing articles and putting it under professors' names. And, I didn't do that. I'm kidding. No kidding, we don't want to be a pastor. But, I just remember the rush, and it's like anything. It's like school and work and yard work and all the rest of it. Some of us just love the rush. In fact, I think that the way that I was handling the newspaper at that time, and I'm exaggerating a little bit for the sake of the story, I think that it's actually kind of a good metaphor or actually a good example of what society looks like right now. It's like we have all the time in the world, but we just love to either wait till the last minute to do what we need to do, or we like to cram as much things into the time that we have and proclaim to everybody else that we have no time. We like to walk around and tell people that we're busy. It's a badge of honor. Luke and I were talking about this past week. It's a badge of honor to answer somebody else and say, hey, how are you doing? It's a badge of honor to say, things are busy. Like, when's the last time somebody asked, how are you doing, that you didn't say, things have been busy? It's something that it rolls off our tongues. It's a way that we live out our lives. It's something that we love to say. And in fact, when somebody doesn't respond with busy, or they say, actually, I've just been taking it easy this past week, we think something's wrong with them. We think that maybe we need to keep an eye on them. We think that maybe we need to talk to their Connect group leader and make sure that they get them some more work at Slate Church because they're just not working hard enough. It's like people that take it easy and rest easy somehow has something wrong with it. God's been doing something in my heart in the later weeks of this summer and just showing me that the way that I've been living my life for the last number of years is just not what he's called me to live. That's a hard thing to come to as somebody that has not only accepted the way that culture runs itself to attire, but somebody that actually prides himself on doing what culture does. I love being able to tell people we had 4 jobs in university, newly married, full-time doing bachelor degrees. We did double degrees, both of us, while we were in university, although I missed out on one stats class to get me my business degree, and my wife was the one that taught it, so I don't know what happened there, but maybe you should just talk to her after the service. But I love telling people all the things that we did. But here's the thing. It's okay to do that for a season. It's not okay to live your life like that. Listen, there are going to be seasons in your life. We were newly married. Nobody told us that we should have money before we got married. They did. Many people told us that. But we needed to make a way so we didn't come out of school debt-free and that we could come into pastoring and not have all this burden on us as we were trying to lead a church. We knew we had to work hard. But those seasons in our lives need to change, and they need to shift, and they need to be just that. They need to be seasons. See, I want to talk to you about how when we receive God's rest, we actually become our best. So many of us think that we're going to be our best when we do all the things that are out there to do. Some of us think that we're going to be our best that every time somebody asks us to do something that we say yes. Some of us think that we're going to be at our best if every time we get asked, how are you doing, we get to answer, things are pretty busy. But the way that God seems to have set up the universe, it looks a little bit different, doesn't it? It doesn't actually look like this at all. And so if you're taking notes, I want you to write down my first point. Just write this down. The way to rest. The way to rest. Rest without work is useless. I know people that rest without working, and they're the worst kind of people to be around because their worlds are small, and they complain about everything, and they don't really accomplish anything, and they're always ahead of you in whatever Netflix show that you want to be watching, and so it puts added pressure on your leisure time. You're like, okay, I must cut out 7 hours of sleep tonight to catch up to this person that's not even working, just ahead of me in shows. So, and working without rest is kind of unproductive as well because it comes back to beat us. The way to rest. I want to talk about the way to rest. Now, when I talk about the way to rest, a lot of us, this is the problem with the whole conversation about work and rest. It's because when I say the way to rest, everybody's waiting for the 10-point checklist of how to rest. Like, the way to rest, this is perfect. Like, thank you for shortcutting my ability to find myself resting. And so we're all waiting. We're like, this is going to be great. He's going to show us 5 easy ways to get Sabbath rest without taking a Sabbath. This is going to be amazing. The way to rest. Okay, give me the points. All right, first you gotta go to bed early. You gotta say no to your boss more, and everybody's like this is perfect. But I'm not talking about the way to rest, as in like, okay, this is how to rest. I'm talking about let's find our way to rest. Let's find what is the journey to a point of rest. Because if I tell you how to rest, you're just gonna add it to your to-do list, and it's actually gonna become more work for you. But what I read in my Bible is that Jesus says, "Come to me." Listen, he's not telling us how to rest. He's telling us where to find rest. The way to rest is through Jesus. The way to rest is the closer we get to Jesus, the more that we can actually rest internally because Jesus ultimately is our rest. That's good. Thanks for showing me all this stuff at the end of my vacation. Makes it easy coming home. Come to me. Come to me. rest is going to take a little bit of work. That's the interesting dilemma when we talk about rest and work, is because when we go to work, we just want to rest. Some of us need to get off social media when we're at work. Some of us need to stop wasting our employer's time when we're at work. Some of us actually need to punch the time card when we actually started working. See, when we go to work, we want to rest. But when we go to rest, we don't want to work. But here's the thing. You need to work out how you rest in order to rest properly. Come to me is an action. It's taking action in the direction of rest. Jesus is saying, you want rest? Okay, you need to take steps towards it, because just saying that I'm going to rest and not doing anything might not be the way that you rest. See, I was listening to a speaker, and a lot of what I'm sharing this morning is a mix between what I heard a speaker say this past week, what God was telling me on vacation, and what I studied as I prepared for this. And the things that this speaker, his name is Levi Luskow, said about Sabbath and rest is that Sabbath is rest, rejuvenation, worship, and delight. What I want to tell you today is that distraction does not equal rejuvenation. So listen, if we just think that rest is going to not take any work whatsoever, what we will find ourselves doing is we come to the moment where we actually get some rest in our weeks, and we'll sit down on our couch, if we can even make it there because we're so tired. We'll sit down on our couch, we'll open up our phone, and we'll start scrolling. And if we can work up enough energy, we might actually get over to YouTube, and we'll just start watching. Mr. Beast mode is doing some new stuff. I don't know. I've been watching this guy. He just gives away stuff. I'm like, you need to come to Waterloo and give away some stuff. But anyway, and if you get up enough energy after that, you might make it over to Netflix and think, well, maybe I could rest for even 25 minutes. Wouldn't that be something? And you go over there and you'll watch reruns of Friends because you didn't really plan to watch anything else, and you start watching them. You'll be like, whoa, I'm really resting. Funny thing is that you could spend 10 minutes doing this, you could spend 3 hours doing this, and isn't the result of doing that always the same? You leave going like, man, I just feel so tired, I wish I could rest. You walk away from this, and it doesn't give you what you thought it was going to give you, because here's the thing, distraction does not equal rejuvenation. Distraction is not what we're after. Jesus didn't say, hey, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will help you distract yourselves. I'll put on a puppet show for you. I'll walk on water, distract you a little bit from what's actually going on in your life. I'll feed a bunch of people, distract you from what's actually going on. No, what does he say? I will give you rest. I will give you rejuvenation. I will give you delight. I will give you worship. These are the things that are actually going to impact your soul. But it takes the act of come to me. See, we got to draw closer to Jesus. The closer we get to Jesus, the more we will understand how we rest. The more we will receive the rest that we're actually looking for. If we're just looking for it in ourselves, it's going to be a hard road to rest. Come to me, all who are. Okay, I want to stop here as well, because there's some of us, I think, that we don't believe that we deserve rest. There's some of us in this room, based on the way that we grew up, maybe our parents, our mom or our dad, they never took rest, so we don't believe that we deserve rest. Or maybe there's those of us that we're so filled with shame over the things that we've done that go against God, that when we believe that our act of coming towards God, the work that we think it means is getting our lives in order so that we can actually approach Jesus out of a place of righteousness. And so we get all scared and we're all filled with shame, and we're like, this is going to take a lot of work. And it actually starts giving us anxiety about approaching God, because we're like, I know what I did last week. I know what I've been ignoring from a past season in my life. And if I come to Jesus, I'm not going to find rest. I'm going to find more shame. And so when Jesus says all who are weary, we discount ourselves, because he must not be talking about me. But listen, logic is broken down into a few different things. Logic, we can separate things and statements into particulars or universals. You either make a universal statement or you make a particular statement. A particular statement is things like some and many and a few or a lot and that sort of thing. And so when you're describing things, a lot can come to me. You're talking about a particular group of people that can come to you. But Jesus here makes a universal statement. Aristotle would say, listen to this guy. And he would say, Jesus said all. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter what your predisposition is. It doesn't matter what your past has looked like. It doesn't matter what you've done. It says all who are weary and burdened come to me. I think that's a pretty good indication that all of us should start to go to Jesus. We should all get to Jesus, because if we're looking for rest, the way to rest is to go to Jesus. To forget all those things that we've been thinking about ourselves and say, hey, maybe if Jesus said we all should come to him, maybe I might actually find rest through my shame, through my predispositions, through the things that have been holding me back. Maybe I just need to approach him and see if this is actually true. Because here's the thing, God is not a liar like some of us expect him to be. God is true to his promises. When he says, come to me and you'll find rest, guess what? When you come to Jesus, you will find rest. You know, when I was in high school, I would spend 2 hours in prayer with Jesus a day. It's crazy. That's impressive. Say, hey, I'm impressed. Everybody say it. Say, I'm impressed. You're like, I'm not doing that. That's so funny. Church is like, no, not doing that. Hey, and listen, neither am I. Because you know what that did to me for the next number of years? It caused me to not want to go back to Jesus anymore. It became so religious in my heart that I felt if I only went to Jesus for an hour and 59 minutes, that I actually wasn't spending enough time with Jesus. If I went to Jesus for a half hour, I wasn't spending enough time with Jesus. If I went to Jesus for an hour and 59 minutes and 33 seconds, wasn't enough time for Jesus. The thing is that Jesus isn't putting a time limit on how much time you got to spend with him. He's just saying, hey, come to me, all who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. It doesn't matter what's keeping you from Jesus. Why don't you just trust Jesus and come closer to him? I'm learning with my son. Sometimes I think he says one thing. He goes, I'm like, sick. My son was baptized with the gift of tongues. You know, like, and he walks along, and I think he says, like, come play hockey with me. So I'm like, perfect. And he always finishes, he finishes it with, come me. And that means come with me. And so I'm like, grabs my finger, little tiny hand on your finger. This is the sweetest thing about being a dad, I'm telling you. And he pulls me. It's like my this finger is getting longer than this finger because of my son. It's just like, okay, you know. And so we walk along. And inevitably, almost every time, we go and do something that I wasn't expecting because I didn't understand. I didn't understand what he was saying. Here's the thing. Some of us need to just trust what God is saying, because we misinterpret what he's saying by come to me and I'll give you rest. Some of us need to just take Jesus by the hand and say, okay, I'm going to trust you because you're God and I'm created by you. You're God, and I'm going to follow you, because here's the thing. Things might get lost in translation. This is the difference in theological. We talk equivocal, univocal. Univocal is having one voice with God. Equivocal means we can't understand God at all. And there's people that line up on either side, but you know and I know that it's a mix of both, that there's things we can understand about God, but there's things that get missed in translation. And here's one of the things that gets missed in translation in Western society, that God actually values rest. So when we hear rest, we see it as a bad thing, but God is saying to us, listen, just trust me, grab my hand, come with me, I want to show you rest. Come on. Distraction does not equal rejuvenation. You know, he says, I will give. Is it okay if I just walk through the verse as it's written? I don't really want to add a whole lot of my own. I just want to show you what God's been showing me. And he says, I will give. I love this because it's less about getting and it's more about receiving. It's less about getting and it's actually more about receiving. I love this because so many times when I feel like I need rest and I'm weary and I have a lot of burden on me, a lot of the times what I want to do is I want to go out and get rest. Right? So if I'm not doing the distracting thing, it's actually going to get rest. And so I put on my spandex, and I put over my, Julia would know because her husband does this as well. They're called bib shorts. And I put on my skinny little latex suit, and I go out cycling for way too long because I want to get myself some rest, right? I cycle a lot, and actually not as much this past summer. I need to repent because I just lied there. But I put on all this stuff, and I'm going to get myself some rest. I'm thankful that the way that Jesus describes it is, come to me and I will give you rest. Listen, you don't need to fight for it. Have you ever sat in a parking lot wanting to go rest at a coffee shop, and you're just debating the whole time what coffee shop you want to go to? Like, wow, that Starbucks would be great, but I don't really like that. That Starbucks would be great, but I don't really know what it is. Small talk would be great. I don't want to go there. And all of a sudden, you've worked yourself into a place where you're not even resting. You're actually fretting about the place where you're going to go rest. Listen, let's cut out all the junk and just realize what Jesus says. Come to me and I will give you rest. It's about receiving his rest, receiving what he's required of you. I love what one of the things that Levi Lusko said in his message. He said, Sabbath is one day, but it could be more. Listen, it could mean more, but it's never going to mean less than one day. I love that idea because if we just lean into what Jesus has for us, we're going to understand that when we take what he has for us, we won't go looking for it in other places. This blew me away. When we take what we need to do, we need to find rest in what we should so that we don't go find rest in places we shouldn't. My goodness, what I found from being overworked is I start finding rest in places that I shouldn't. And that's the scariest place of all. Because your body will find rest in some form or another. This is a whole story of David, right? David, he's supposed to be out fighting his battles, and he's supposed to be doing that, and all of a sudden he's not doing it. It says in the time when kings go off to war, what is he doing? He's out on the rooftop looking out over all the people, and all of a sudden he sees a woman bathing, and next thing you know it, she's having his kid, and he has her husband killed because he was supposed to be doing something. Listen, there's times to work, there's times to rest, but we should rest in the way that God has set it up so that we don't go find places in rest in places that we shouldn't. And it'll come. You'll find rest in various ways. Okay, the way to rest is through Jesus. Second point, join in the rest. I didn't say join in with the rest. I said join in the rest. Because if you join in with the rest, you're not going to find any rest. Our society does not put a value on rest whatsoever. But we need to join in the rest that God has actually created. This is a part I actually got from Levi Lusko, and then all those other things are broken off of it that I mentioned his name beside. But this is the thing that just absolutely blew my mind. If we go back to Genesis and God is creating the world, he creates the world in how many days? 7 days. Okay, we don't need to get into the theological reasons, whether or not we believe it's new earth creation, old earth creation, whether it's Darwin's theory or whatever else. That's not the point of today, okay? What we're going to talk about is the order of creation from God's perspective. And what we're going to talk about is that for 6 days he created the earth, and then what did he do on the seventh day? I said it earlier. He rested. One of the things that blew my mind that I never, ever saw, and this is what drew me to Levi Lusko's message, because it was a little clip that I saw that I was like, that blew my mind, is that on the 6th day, God created man. He created woman. On the 6th day, he created them. And so the 6th day ends, and the way it's described, Adam all of a sudden becomes a person. He's like, cool. This place is sick. All right. Jesus is like, all right, get ready for bed because you're going to sleep. Tomorrow, 7th day. And so Adam goes to bed, he wakes up, and he goes, all right, what are we going to do? First day of human existence, first full day. And what does God tell Adam to do? Rest. And I love this because the way that it was described by Levi Lusko is he's saying, this is why. Because we rest in what God's done before we rest from what we've done. We rest in what God's done before we rest with what man wasn't there helping God create the world. They weren't there for the 6 days where God put in all the effort, and yet we get the benefit from all that God has done. That's the exact message of the gospel, is that Jesus came and paid a price for us, and we get to rest in his sacrifice even though we didn't do anything. We get the benefit of all that God did, and all we have to do is come to Jesus and receive what he's done. Isn't that beautiful? Come on, can we give Jesus some praise for that? Because that's phenomenal. And so it's not as much about resting from what we've done. It's actually resting in what God's done. It's resting in what God's done. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart. For I am gentle and humble in heart. I love this because when you look up the word gentle and what it means in its original meaning, it has a lot of ties to this word meek. Everybody say meek. Everybody say Mill. Everybody say Meek Mill. Okay, thanks. Thanks for following along. Anyway, this idea of meek is actually an Old Testament idea. And the Old Testament idea describes the meek as those who are wholly relying on God rather than their own strength to defend against injustice. I'll repeat that again. Meek in the Old Testament describes those who are wholly relying on God rather than their own strength to defend against injustice. Now, I know it says that Jesus is describing himself as gentle, but in the whole process, what's actually happening as we come to Jesus and we find rest in him is that we're actually becoming more like Jesus. You know, the end result of finding rest is not busyness, it's rest, right? The end result of busyness is oftentimes pride, but oftentimes the end result of rest is actually humility. Because humility puts you in a place of realizing that you're not as in control of your life as you think that you are. And it's a meek posture, and it's a humble posture, and it's a gentle posture, and it causes us to be a lot more like Jesus than we ever expected. And I love the way that it describes the meek. Old Testament describes the meek as those wholly relying on God rather than their own strength to defend against injustice. You know why you need to join in the rest? You need to just make a decision to join in the rest. Because if you don't, you'll go on believing that you have more influence over your life than what you really do. And I think it's a sad existence to go through life putting so much pressure on ourselves that we have so much to do with our happiness and the end results of our lives and all the rest. Yes, we partner with Jesus in all of that, but his part is the bigger part. We partner with him, but his part is the bigger part. You know, what's better to do is to say, wait a sec, when I was resting, God was still getting things done. You see, 7 days of creation, taking one day off, it was mind-blowing to us to think about, wait, Jesus gave man rest before he ever did anything. But it was mind-blowing to the ancient Near East that this country would take one day off at all. It was mind-blowing because the Sabbath was accompanied with another type of Sabbath. It was called the Year of Jubilee. Every 7 years, they would rest their fields. Something that if you know any farmers, if you are a farmer, this is something you do to allow the soil to enrich itself anyways. You don't work the field and you just allow the nutrients to come back. 1 year out of 7 years, you just didn't do anything at all. You didn't just left it. And the interesting thing is that in the ancient Near East, it was a lot more like our culture than we think that it was. In the ancient Near East, people thought the Israelites were insane for taking a day off. They thought they were insane for taking a year off. They thought they were insane for not working as hard as they could have. Sorry, Gary Vee, but hustle looks a little different in our society today than just working 24/7 till I reach my goals. You know what it looks like? Obeying God 24/6, 24/7, and allowing him to do through our lives what we couldn't do on our own. See, what the Israelites were saying year after year, day after day, week after week to their culture was, listen, we can take a day off a week and we can take a year off every 7 years. And we can do it because we understand that our promotion, our produce of our land, our ability to receive blessing doesn't come from us. It actually comes from God. And so we're just going to trust in him, and we're going to take the breaks that we deserve because God rested on the seventh day, and I'm going to follow his example and not the example that the world's setting around us. Listen, the world that we live in might tell you to keep working, keep hustling, try to go after another promotion, keep going after this, keep going after that. And what God's trying to scream through it all is, my children, take a break and come to me. Join in the rest. And finally, I just want to end on this. I've got so much time. You guys came up at the right time, but I still have so much time. God must have done something to me over vacation because all of a sudden I've still got 1 point left and I have 7 minutes to develop it. And I'm going to fit in the final stuff in there somewhere as well. This is amazing. Everybody say, praise Jesus. You're getting a full message for the first time ever. Thank you, Jesus. Somebody's like, just go on with it. You're going to mess yourself up again. So I want you to write this down. Carry the rest. Carry the rest. Now 11 a.m. is going to get this point way better than 9 a.m. is going to get it because I forgot my prop in the green room. and it's not worth going and getting it right now. But I want you to write this down. Carry the rest. No, I don't want it. You won't even know what it is. Because he says, take on my yoke and my burden. That's an interesting thing to end a whole little blurb on rest on. It's like, wait, I thought we were getting away from weariness. I thought we were getting away from burdens. And what does he say? Take on my yoke and my burden. Listen, what we're not trying to do is get rid of burdens altogether. What we're trying to get rid of is heavy burdens. We're not trying to just rid ourselves of any type of responsibility that God could give us. You imagine a parent doing that? Diego, you imagine doing that with your kids? Like, okay, what Pastor Brandon's saying is I don't even have to, God's going to give me rest? Kids, fend for yourselves, No, kids are a burden, but they're a blessed burden. Take on my burden. Take on my yoke. Let's understand the difference between the burden that we carry and the burden that Jesus wants to give us. Listen, sometimes it's not even in what we're carrying, it's in how we're carrying it. See, a yoke would be put between two oxen, and those of you that have heard this before would know that this is mind-blowing. But a yoke went between two oxen. I'm watching Little House on the Prairie again. I bought it for $60 off of Apple. There was a little deal. I bought it the whole season, 200 episodes, $60. You know what I'm binging at night? Little House on the Prairie. Things are crazy in the Richardson household. And Charles Ingalls and Carolyn Ingalls, they got these oxen that were just stolen in the last episode. And Charles walks uptown all gangster-like and gets back his oxen. Charles Ingalls is the original gangster. Gets his oxen. But I love this because it says, take on my yoke. Listen, you need to take on a yoke because when you're paired up with Jesus, all of a sudden you're able to carry more. A lot of us, we're just trying to take our burdens ourselves and forgetting that when Jesus plays a bigger part, all of a sudden what we're carrying becomes a lot less because God, who created the universe and created all the things that we're sometimes worry ourselves about, is now right beside us with the yoke attached to us, and he's willing to walk with us and carry it differently. Sometimes it's not what you're carrying, it's how you're carrying it. But I also want to let you know that when we go to Jesus and we go through Jesus for things, all of a sudden things change. Listen, work is not from the devil. In Genesis, God was working and people were working before the fall ever happened. What became the difference between work after the fall is that it became toilsome. That's the word, toilsome. And interestingly, when we read weary in the NIV, it actually means labor and toilsome labor. So that's the original meaning of this verse. Come to me, all you who are doing toilsome labor and are heavy laden. So you're doing toilsome labor and you actually have a heavy burden on top of yourselves. And what Jesus is saying, hey, I'll put my yoke and my burden on you. You know what he's doing? He's saying, listen, you come to me and you find joy in me. And all of a sudden your work goes from toilsome to joy-filled. All of a sudden, your burden that's heavy is shared with me and it becomes light. Because when we get on Jesus' page, all of a sudden, things get a lot better. Take on my yoke and my burden. This past number of weeks, things have been a little bit different. And so we got a chance to go on vacation and we went to Sauble Beach for a part of it with Pastor Luke and Victoria and Emma. My wife and Luke are brother and sister, and so when you sometimes might see us in a lot of Instagram stories and wonder, like, do they do everything together? Yeah, we do. It's not because we're weird, it's because we're family too. And like literally everything. We do church together, family together, vacation together, and it's the best because when you're doing life with your best friends, it's not a burden. And we're there, and we're Sauble Beach, the whole family for a week, and every night, we were a little bit off the beach because we actually wanted to live civilized this year and not cram ourselves into a one-bedroom cottage. And so we rented a house off the main strip, like civilized human beings. And every night I would get on this little bike and I would cycle as fast as I could down to the water to catch the sunrise right after I put the kids to bed. And water was cold. Has Lake Huron ever been warm? No. And so I would go in there and I would jump in the water, and every day I would get there for like 5 minutes left of the sunrise. It's been a busy day because, listen, as parents, we don't get the luxury of having a day off with our kids. It's been a busy day. You're at the end of the day, you're tired. You're wondering, like, this passage is for me as a parent. All the parents in the room are like, yeah, I get this. I get that the burden's not going away, but guess what? It can get better through Jesus. I would sit there and I had all these things on my mind and like, oh, did I really rest today? And all the rest of the stuff. And I go into the water, I watch the sunrise go down and just transfixed by the beauty of God's creation. Every single night I would turn around, look at the sunrise, and all of a sudden I would turn around and, if you know anything about Sobel, everybody lines up the beach to watch the same sunrise. So I would turn around and God has done this new thing in my soul. Because I biked past everybody and I didn't really see faces, but I would turn around and all of a sudden I saw a crowd. And then all of a sudden I saw individuals, and all of a sudden God started doing something in my heart day after day, night after night. I would see God's beauty and I would turn around and all of a sudden my perspective was, hey, you're not weary. I still have a calling for you. Look on the beach. And all of a sudden I started realizing, like, my gosh, there's people here. While I'm on vacation, God wants to reach people. All of a sudden I started seeing faces. It's amazing because I walked into the water carrying a lot of stuff, but all I saw was God's beauty in the form of creation. All it took was to see God's beauty to turn around and start to realize all the people that I had missed on the way to doing what I thought I needed for rest. And all of a sudden, when God got into my heart, all of a sudden my perspective changed. Listen, all I want for our church going into the next season is some of us probably thought summer was going to be relaxing. And we're laughing at it now as we gear up for another busy season in the fall. And I just want to let you know that relaxation is not a time amount away. Relaxation is not a place or a destination. Relaxation is not getting yourself into a frenzy or a state of mind. Rest, rejuvenation, delight, and worship is all found in Jesus. And the more that you can find yourself in God's house, the more you can find yourself in His presence, the better this next year is going to go. So if you've gotten to the end of summer and you're going, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm rested for what's coming, guess what? You don't need to be. All you need to do is to turn your face to Jesus day after day and trust that He's going to give you the strength that you need to carry His burden and His yoke, because it's light and it's easy. Can we stand up in this place? Hey, I want to pray for anybody in this room that maybe you haven't turned your face to Jesus ever before in your life. And, we do this every week because the Bible makes it pretty clear all we have to do to be a part of God's family is accept what Jesus has already done for us. We got a Sabbath without doing any work. We get the sacrifice of Jesus and freedom from our sin and everlasting peace and joy with God, not based on what we've done, but also based on what Jesus has done. So with every head bowed and eye closed, I want to know if there's anybody in here that wants to make a decision to follow Jesus for the first time. You need to know that I'm not about to point anybody out. There's no bait and switch about to happen. This isn't a moment of manipulation, but this is a moment of just like, I want you to have some time with God to reflect on what He's doing in your heart. On the count of 3, if you want to make a decision to follow Jesus, all I'm going to ask is that you put up your hand. I already see that hand. That's beautiful. And I just want to say a quick prayer for you. That's all I want to do, as you invite Jesus to be Lord of your life. So 1, Jesus loves you. 2, today is the day of salvation.
Thank you for watching. Again, if you were impacted by this message in any way, send an email to mystory@slatechurch.com. You can also visit slatechurch.com and fill out one of our online Connect cards. We would love to see you in person at one of our Sunday services. As well, you can stay connected with us by following us at Slate Church on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.